Tennesseans are anxious about the economy. That's according to a brand new poll that just came out within the last hour. Researchers found both political parties are stressed about housing costs, the price of groceries, and monthly bills. And voters are evenly split on how Tennessee is handling this. 49% think Tennessee is on the wrong track, while 50% think the volunteer state is headed in the right direction. The poll found that people are far more pessimistic about the country as a whole, with 58% saying the country is headed down the wrong path. Most Tennesseans, around 78%, believe the U.S. should focus on issues at home rather than international conflicts.